It had been a short while since the sonic rainboom had burst through the sky and given Pinkie Pie her cutie mark. As they looked at the consistently X'd-out boxes on their humble calendar, a week had passed. Pinkie Pie had marked the day with her cutie mark, and Cloudy had crudely crossed it out along with the day. Pinkie was in the kitchen and happily working on a fresh batch of cupcakes. She'd pulled them out of the oven, then let them cool before she made the frosting and applied it to their tops. Her sisters walked in. Limestone and Marble glanced her way. It was Marble, who often was called Inky, that spoke first. "What in Equestria are these? What did you make?" Inky's voice was flat, and she looked tired. The plate was pushed in Inky's face by Pinkie. Marble poked one with a hoof. She seemed unimpressed with it. That didn't cause Pinkie to falter. She beamed and exclaimed,
"I made cupcakes!"
She bounced in place.
"Want to try them?"
Marble and Limestone exchanged glances, then both picked the one they thought came out the best. The cupcakes didn't have any wrappers, so they bit into them. They chewed on the cupcakes, seemed to think, then smiled. Pinkie bounced at the blossoming grins upon her sisters' faces.
"Do you like them? Do you?
She looked ready to explode into confetti, throwing and having another party. Marble thought on it, but she didn't speak a verbal answer. She was the quieter sister. They're good," said Limestone bluntly.
"Just good?"
Pinkie's smile dropped, her hair threatening to fizzle, and the tips were becoming straight. She was hoping that she had a gift with pastries. It seemed her batch was less than stellar.
"Yeah, they're okay,"
Marble whispered. She ducked her head, then made eye contact and stated matter-of-factly,
"Something is missing, or off, but they're okay. Good. All right." "Oh."
Pinkie scuffed her hoof and then contemplated it.
"But I want them to be great! What's wrong?"
She picked one up herself, not caring about its condition. Hers threatened to fall apart in her hoof. She popped it into her mouth and gobbled it whole, Pinkie Pie style. Deep down, it was missing something. It was the same as the ones in town, and the ones Granny Pie had made. Pinkie's cupcakes needed to be special. She needed a flavor no pony had thought of before. She set the rest down and began to search the cupboards for something to add. Most of the ingredients were plain. Bran, cereal, it was all bound to make her cupcakes more boring and much less thrilling. Her siblings looked at each other, shrugged, then went to rest. Pinkie was fast at doing her chores, but they didn't have her energy. Limestone often did Marble's halfway due to Marble being more uncertain. Pinkie's hoof scuffed the edge. A piece of decorative metal was loose, and it had been a long while since Igneous had checked for loose screws. It itched her skin as she moved, and she recoiled, the metal slicing into her arm. She yelped as though a bee had stung her. The cut upon her arm went up and down. It was on the back, but throbbed and bled when she bent her arm. She looked at the cupboard, thinking it was the cheese grater, but at that angle it couldn't have. Nobody left cheese graters upside down with its sharp edges likely to catch flesh. She saw the metal and mentally told herself to fix it. She didn't want Limestone or Marble to get hurt. She had been leaning over her cupcakes and sighed as she saw her blood dripping onto them. The icing had been applied while they were still too hot, and so had slipped off the tops. The blood soaked into the bread. She licked her wound to clean it. Then the tang of metal hit her mouth. But after that hit, she tasted something different. Celestia said all ponies had magic within them, inside of their bodies, but no pony had likely taken it literally. When Pinkie Pie tasted her blood, she tasted her party magic. She tasted sweet, sweeter than icing, but with a burst of flavor. She tried to find a way of explaining it, but all her mind could think of was when all the fruit got smashed together and each one could be tasted at once. She picked up the cupcake and bit into it. It was amazing! She cried out in amazement. She tasted great! She then wondered how a unicorn's blood might taste.
Don't be weird, Pinkie. Just say Eureka! I figured it out!
She ate every bloodied cupcake excitedly. Each one tasted great.
It's fantastic! It's amazing! It's terrific! It's fantastic-terrific!
She bounced rapidly. Pinkie hurried to gather more of her blood and get a new batch. She had stopped bleeding and thus had to wonder if it was sane to use her own blood. The filly paused, then contemplated her earlier unicorn ponderings. She headed to the family's shed. It hadn't been used much since she was born. Bouncing, she made up her young mind to do as extensive planning as she could to make her cupcakes the bestest, tastiest treats ever. "Oh," Limestone exclaimed, her voice sounding way too chipper for the serious female. "Much better. Tasty. Good. These are way better, Pinkie."
Oh, yes,
Marble said loudly and with a bit less grace as she stuffed her face into her cupcake. "These are amazing." Pinkie was thrilled. Both of them had broad smiles on their faces as they munched on her special cupcakes. Pinkie was certain she had enough for a second batch, but she was also fairly certain she could never recreate this flavor. She looked from Limestone to Marble and felt extra happy.
I'm so glad you like them!
Marble tapped her hoof and tipped her head.
What did you do differently?
"I don't care so long as they taste this good," Limestone said, eating off the plate and talking with her mouth full.
It's a secret ingredient.
She winked. Lucky for Pinkie, despite how excited she was to talk all day about everything and nothing at once, her sisters weren't that way. Thus, no more was said on the matter. Earlier that day, before she had even come up with what her new batch of cupcakes would look like, Pinkie Pie had gone to town. She had journeyed with the surviving failed batch. Some leftover batter and replacements for the ones she ate were included. While looking in the high cupboards, she found an odd pouch, opened but not used much. It was a sleeping powder, and even had its odd name on the tag, something she couldn't pronounce. She hadn't questioned why Cloudy or Igneous had it. Her parents were weird. The powder had been added to the cupcakes. She hadn't thought about how much to use. She walked past many ponies trying to guess who was a good pony, a bad pony, a phony pony. She wanted a good candidate to sacrifice, and she needed to pick the right one. Pinkie had some ponies who she thought were just rotten or mean, not nicey nice ponies, but stinky bad apples. There was a young filly who was a bit older than Pinkie Pie. The female was off on her own. She had a golden mane that ended in a little curl. Her lavender eyes were downcast. Her pale blue body stood out among the mostly drab ponies. Definitely some pony who didn't usually come there. Pinkie's eyes brightened as she looked at her. A bumblebee sniffing a flower was her cutie mark. She hopped over to her, motioning to the sad female pony to follow as they talked.
Hi, I'm Pinkie Pie. Well, not really. I'm Pinkimina Diane Pie, but everyone calls me Pinkie.
She tipped her head towards the filly, mouthing, "And you are?"
Sweet Bumblebee?"
She fussed and looked at her cutie mark. It must have been new to her, as she did a double take.
You look so sad,
Pinkie said, tipping her head again, then beaming at her kindly.
Yeah, my parents...
She shook her head and looked away.
So I came here to be with relatives, but they're busy. You know what I do when I'm sad?
She said, not seeming like she was paying attention fully. Sweet Bumblebee looked back up. She seemed intrigued.
What?
Her pale eyes lit up as Pinkie Pie offered a cupcake to her. It was so sparkly with pink glitter and christened with Pinkie's cutie mark in fondant. Sweet's eyes were huge and wide as she stared at the cupcake like it was an amazing work of art.
I eat cupcakes!
She laughed.
This is beautiful. It's colorful, too. This is actually food? I've never ate something so pretty. Can I eat it?
She seemed to hesitate.
Absolutely! It'll cheer you right up, sweet Bumblebee. You can eat this and we can keep walking. If you want to hear about my family or how I bake them, I'll tell you.
The orphaned filly looked from the cupcake to Pinkie. They had a lot in common, which was obvious. Both were pink. Pinkie had decorated it to look like her.
Okay.
Sweet Bumblebee wiped her eyes with her free leg and started to walk. The female mentioned being dressed as a flower and acting in a play. Cupcake balanced surprisingly well upon her nose as they walked. Pinkie Pie listened, then talked as well. Both were fascinated with the other.
So, are your parents gone?
She asked, stealing Sweet's smile. Pinkie Pie felt a little bad. Her curiosity had grown too big and she pressed a hoof to her mouth and looked down.
Oh, yes. The accident killed both of them. I don't want to see when they put them back in the ground. Mom used to say we came from the ground. We're earth ponies, but I don't think I'll get over how much this hurts.
She hoved at the ground and looked at her flank.
They got to see this, but I'm still not sure exactly what it means. But I know I got it working with bees when I helped a farmer, so I must have a future with pollination and trees.
The pony spoke the words like she understood, but got a bit stuck on pollination and its full meaning.
Whatever that is. It's all sounding like a lot of work, and I'm not feeling up to it after everything.
Finally, they were alone. No pony was walking where they were, and it was fairly close to her home. Pinkie Pie had only carried her siblings, but Sweet Bumblebee couldn't have been too heavy to carry.
I'm sorry.
She put a hoof around Sweet Bumblebee's back and watched as the filly leaned in and nibbled on the cupcake she'd taken down from her nose. Pinkie Pie looked at the cutie mark and suspected it was related to baking with honey. What a shame. Honey sounded great for baking. Plus, Sweet Bumblebee was great at balancing.
Oh, wow!
Sweet said, sounding as amazed as Limestone and Marble had at the second batch.
This is amazing! I know I can do better. These are the rejects.
She waited, her mind calm and her eyes watching the sky. The rain boom was gone, but in her mind she could still see it. It was still happening and alive in her memory. Pinkie Pie cherished that beautiful sight dearly.
How do you feel?
Sweet Bumblebee opened her mouth to reply after finishing the cupcake. She had taken several minutes and seemed to get tired.
Yeah, I feel much better. Oh, I'm suddenly tired.
Pinkie leapt to her feet, hooves clicking as she tip-tapped in a circle. Sweet Bumblebee looked up at her, eyes slowly closing.
Nighty-night-night, don't let those awful parasprites bite!
She giggled, feeling a rush of adrenaline. The idea of any pony catching her made her heart pump. She was looking over her shoulders and giggling. Nobody was around, which made this secret even more fun. While she snuck Sweet's body home, she pretended to be a spy. If she got caught, she'd be gunned down by the royal guards and thrown in a big prison. And then she'd have to start all over. Pinkie Pie wanted to be the best at all games. She managed to get the unconscious filly to her shed, and as she did, she went,
"Mission accomplished,"
and mimed a hoof bump towards the sky. She had felt bad for Sweet Bumblebee and thought of waiting for her to wake, but she'd had a bad time and Pinkie wasn't sure about the noise. So she slowly dissected her. She put organs aside to try later, then nibbled on flesh. It tasted magical. She'd been right! Sweet Bumblebee was still an earth pony, though, so that didn't tell Pinkie whether unicorns were the same. She put the meat in a different bucket. Not focused on pacing herself, Sweet was dead within 2 minutes, as Pinkie had removed the lungs too early. It was a laborious effort, and her entire body was on fire from how hard carving flesh was. The rock farm had prepared her for heavy work, however. It was almost as if fate was telling her this was where she was supposed to be, to have such a hobby. She had liked Sweet Bumblebee, and stared at the remains. Too much would draw attention to what she'd done. She wanted to keep a part of her, however. Her blue eyes reached the female's flank. She had just gotten that. It would be a shame to let it go to waste. She cut both cutie marks off. That way, she would have them with her, even after the cupcakes were gone. In that way, Sweet Bumblebee would never be truly gone. Her soul would rejoin her parents, and her body would feed ponies, and her cutie marks would be with Pinkie. The rock farm had many forbidden places, but worse, it had dangerous ones. She wished the volcanoes were still active, but maybe sometimes she would anger Limestone and see if her kicking it would create fresh lava. Without it, the bodies would pile up, and the smell would carry. She needed a solution. Many ponies made shoes, bowls, silverware, and other metal objects. Thus, she checked on her own if they were home once she cleaned up. Once she found one who wasn't, she went to the forge with the body. It burned extra hot thanks to equestrian magic. She didn't expect the body to burn up so fast. Before her eyes, the carcass sunk into what looked like lava and dissolved.
Phew! All that work really builds up an appetite.
After she returned, she retrieved the cupcake mix and other ingredients. Sadly, her parents didn't have a plug-in blender, so she had to use the backup grain miller. It was basically a meat grinder, and she had already removed the bones, so it worked. Once more, she was working out to turn pony essence into cupcakes. It wasn't easy making the magic-laden meat into pulp. She made the first few bowls using blood, as that was the easiest of the magic to harvest. Once it was all properly mixed, it was brought into the house. To anyone else, it looked like an off-colored orange mix. She could easily say it was failed carrot or orange cupcakes. Pinkie had to really use her mind to think on these things and how to work around being caught. There were so many possibilities, and her Pinkie sense only worked for falling objects thus far. When the first batches came out, they were amazing. She smiled happily at the sight of her cupcakes. It was a while later. Pinkie Pie had been home alone. Cloudy and Igneous saw them as able to be left alone, even as Granny Pie had insisted on babysitting them. Their grandmother had always adored them, even as she often looked sadly at Cloudy, an expression none of the three could understand upon her face. But Cloudy had told her visits had to be supervised, unless emergencies. "We don't want another incident," she'd said one night, and Granny Pie's hair had deflated for a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
And that had been it. No more surprise visits when they were alone. They had the land and the house to themselves. It was usually only for 2 or 3 days, and before it, they'd always do odd rituals after sending them to bed. Pinkie was curious, but her cutie mark had already angered them, and all because it wasn't rock-related. But there was so much more to life than rocks, like the cupcakes she was making at the moment. The mix and tins were all readied. Pinkie had thought she had a few hours more. The mare before her was another earth pony, which was all this village seemed to have, much to her dismay. The female was unconscious from another sleep-powdered cupcake. She held the knife and prepared to make the Y incision, something she'd learned to do after sneaking to the morgue to learn more about death, under a lie that her parents said to ask the mortician instead of bothering them. The door opened behind her, and Limestone's bright eyes came in, hard like their father's. Behind her was Marble, head ducked and obviously apologizing already for intruding. The pink pony whipped around, both hooves raised, knife still held. She looked like she was playing cops and robbers. Her pupils went to pinpricks in surprise. Limestone looked at her, then at the asleep pony held down with baling wire and twine. Marble moved closer, hovering over them. She seemed to believe them dead, then saw their chest rise and fall. Her purple eyes shot to her sister, still frozen in place, and blood upon her and her knife.
Pinkamena? What are you about to do?
She began to sweat. Limestone's gaze was pinning her in place. She shuddered beneath her scrutiny. Her blue eyes went from one sister to the other. Limestone walked around both of them, to the buckets, then the bowls, then the pony measurements. How much blood to use, meat and organ tissue per each batch of cupcakes. Her eyes didn't stay from Pinkie long. She saw the pony, the instructions, and the work in progress. Her brain did the work swiftly. "You're making cupcakes." She trembled, body aching in the position she dared not move from.
Yes?
Marble took it in, then gasped.
Ponies? That's your secret ingredient. You're using ponies to make them.
She stuttered. The adrenaline rush hit, but it was wrong. Everything about being caught was pre-planned for strangers. Pinkie dearly loved her sisters. She'd never want them to hate her. She felt her hair deflate, a soft, flopping sound as it drooped. Her eyes pricked with tears. Now her siblings would hate her. They would despise her. She wouldn't just go to prison, she'd be in her own form of Tartarus, hated by the bestest two friends she had ever had in her short life. Limestone reached up and took the knife from her grasp. Her gaze looked upon it, golden eyes boring into the reflection upon the blade. Pinkie and Marble both had seen that stare. It was the same look she gave her reflection when Igneous had tore into her over a mistake. A look of deep contemplation and debate. Pinkie's mane drooped so low her tail now swept the floor. She felt devastation. Limestone poked the corpse with the knife. She attempted to cut the foal's belly. The knife just scratched into fur and stuck on a small indent that leaked out and then dripped blood. She pulled back and slammed it in with an aggressive and great force. Blood began to spill, and Pinkie twitched nervously at how her sister treated the pony's body. It was quite a contrast to her own methods. Marble grabbed the bucket before she could be asked.
This is kind of hard, but this is a genius idea, Pinkie.
The pink pony's hair fluffed up like a cloud. She became excited.
You're not mad?
It's the magic, right? Limestone asked, having thought many times she felt strangely recharged after a cupcake. We're all magical and all that horse crap. And it's not like in our horns or hooves, but inside of us.
Yeah,
she nodded. Even dead they have this hue, she said, doing an awful job at crushing a piece of meat. A bit of what seemed like glitter was in the blood. It shone a lot like crushed gems. Limestone cut the pony open, poking at the stomach she'd ruptured. Brilliant!
Really?
Both nodded their heads. They moved now, going to be beside them. Marble was catching the blood. She seemed a bit hesitant, but not entirely repulsed. So why do you cut them open while they're asleep? Limestone laughed, eyes focused on the insides.
Well, if they're awake, they're gonna scream. I'd have to rope their mouths or something. Mama and Papa can't know, and they'll hear and do their whole ponies going to Tartarus and respect nature and never kill spiels. The church talk.
Pinkie laughed like it was all a funny joke.
Then we'll have to be dipped in the water if not sent to Celestia to be cleansed. She couldn't even cleanse her own sister, Marble muttered.
They had been fed lots of tales, half of which they weren't sure they quite bought. The Mare in the Moon was above them, and never coming back. Yet some people spoke of a thing called Nightmare Night. All three doubted Luna's rage at the betrayal would be eased by mere sugary treats. Not even Pinkie's wonderful cupcakes could appease the alicorn's wrath. Marble seemed really focused now, having left the buckets where the blood collected and poured over. Her purple eyes were fixated. She moved organs and wanted to study them. The pony's breathing was slower, but it remained alive. She touched the pony's beating heart and gasped in surprise as it twitched with a beat.
We saw an abandoned cave on the mountain. The one they say is dangerous because the miners hit a bad vein, and at that moment it'll all collapse?
Pfft. Limestone laughed.
You're doing a harvest, kind of like we do in the fields with the corn and grain. We could make a harvesting area there. No one goes there, they blocked it off. But there are still old paths barred off we can get through easily. Dragons used to live around the mountains, and some still fly by, roaring and loud. Maybe that can cover up the screams, if anyone can even hear them.
We can play with them before killing them?
Marble asked, her eyes holding a fascinated look.
I want to see if they're all the same on the inside. What does a unicorn's horn look like inside? Oh, what about Pegasi? Their bones must be all hollow, right?
She seemed animated, and both watched Marble chatter excitedly and come out of her quiet, obedient shell. They smiled at her and let her keep going for a while.
What a great idea!
Pinkie exclaimed. All three began to bounce, hopping in circles around the dying pony. They were grinning and happy with each other.
This is an amazing plan, Inky and Blinky! You two think of things I never would!
Limestone laughed.
Bet you thought we were boring, right?
Did you?
Marble seemed slightly wounded.
Yeah,
Pinkie admitted.
I thought no pony in this family would ever be into what me and Granny Pie like, especially this. Boy, I felt so alone. Even partying, it's so shunned and Mama and Papa hate it.
She waved her hoof dismissively.
I'm sorry I thought that about you. You're forgiven,
Marble said, and she lifted out a liver and stared at it with intensity.
Wow, we have a lot of internal organs. I want to learn more.
Limestone was now attempting to cut the pony's fur from their body. It was a messy job, and definitely not a good skin job. But she collected the pelt she'd gotten and seemed to desire to keep it.
Finally! We finally got something to do together that's not icky, nasty, work, boring work!
They all hugged, and Pinkie Pie wished they had a proper way to take family photos at home. She wanted one of the three of them in a big group hug, happier than they normally were. Once they pulled away, the three sisters began to learn from Pinkie how she made cupcakes. With time, they decided they needed a system. They began to sit out and listen and watch every pony. Pinkie would do most of the talking, getting to know each and every pony she could. They each learned the names and assigned numbers to them as they went. It started with 1 and carried on with every face Pinkie saw and didn't know yet. They wrote each one upon a white slip of paper, then folded it in half and dropped it in a pickle jar. From the outside, it looked like any other game of Poor Ponies Bingo. They would do their best to use every drop of ponies they killed, and all three hated wasting any. They learned about the forges and the volcano. Limestone was not afraid to kick it. Perhaps they could get a pocket of something molten enough that the bones would easily be dropped off there. There were deep chasms in the mine shaft, with seemingly no bottom and unstable walls. If worse came to worse, they would drop them down into the abyss and let whatever monster lived that far down enjoy its surprise snack. When they ran out of the so-called special ingredient, they would reach into the jar, swirl their hooves in a circle, and pull out whatever number they'd grabbed. That pony would then be stalked in secret until they could either grab them in a lock too tight to scream, hit them with a rock or hoof, or get a cupcake between their lips. Almost no pony could turn down Pinkie's cupcakes. They were getting very popular, and some even paid for them. All three sisters saw a chance to profit off their magic sugar rush. After capturing them, the three would drag the body into the cave where they had been learning to build crude things. A workbench, a work table, wooden hammers and stakes. It was all terribly crude, but they found it worked fine, regardless. They had also made a table which Limestone had carved from hard stone, only her hooves were strong enough to break. They strapped their victims to that. Then the play would begin. They often tortured the ponies. Pinkie was most interested in talking to them, even in the tense situation. She talked like she was discussing the weather. Marble was excited and loved studying everything from organs to how one pony's hooves differed to another. She had kept several horseshoes and had been very excited to write everything down. She hoped to one day have other types of ponies to compare to their own kind. The world was fascinating to her. Limestone was the most into the torture. She thought up lots of ways to play with the pony. The concept of fear changing the flavor was discussed, and they attempted different methods to see if it was true. Old tools found laying in the earth of the rock farm or long forgotten by their parents and neighbors were picked up, cleaned, and brought to their hideout. No matter what games they played, they always removed and preserved the cutie marks. Marble was experimenting with isopropyl and other alcohols for preserving things in jars, and wanted to learn to tan the hide or treat it so it was less stiff. The cutie marks were divided among them. Sometimes they would sit and pretend they had a hoof of cards and pretend to play Go Fish with the cutie marks, then laugh at how ridiculous the game became. Limestone dared to bet that their cupcakes were the best in all of Equestria. They weren't focused on selling them too much yet, but made a point to share them with their parents and every pony they met. Being extra social was important to Pinkie. She was quite the extrovert. Plus, a good reputation meant they could forge friendships with ponies. Only a few ever begged for the lives of others, and sometimes Pinkie made an exception if she was especially moved. She wasn't heartless, after all. The village called them the sweetest fillies they knew, and they became the Cupcake Sisters, even if their parents scoffed and said pies were a better investment. Of course, they made sure to pace themselves. Sweet Bumblebee's relatives had indeed not really cared after her absence, but some ponies were dearly loved. Every 2 weeks on a good harvest, they would need new supplies. They tried to target mostly those who they knew wouldn't be missed. The number system was mainly aimed at ponies they could take down, with the rest in another jar. They were still fillies, after all. Their cupcake deliveries definitely distracted others from the fear and paranoia slowly peeking into the village over the missing ponies. And nobody would dare suspect the 3 fillies were up to no good. Pinkie had a nearly flawless system worked out. Finally, Pinkie Pie had ambitions which were beyond the dusty old rock farm. She had hoped her sisters would come, but she knew they were not ready to leave yet. Plus, if their absence meant no more ponies went missing, it would instantly blow everything. So they were staying behind. Pinkie Pie needed to spread the smiles to Ponyville and show the world the power of a party pony with the ability to make even the grumpiest old stallion smile. If she could make Igneous break into a grin, she could win any pony over.
Who will make the cupcakes now?
Marble asked, looking rejected.
You don't need me for that, Marble. You and Limestone have taught me as much as I've taught you. You know everything I do.
She hugged her youngest sister tightly.
I believe in you. You can do this.
She stood at the door and before her family, hugged her sisters, then embraced her mother. They had never suspected a thing, and she knew they would never love the real her. They barely loved the Pinkie who had a sugar addiction.
I'll miss you all,
she said, staring at Marble and Limestone. Pinkamena Diane Pie, I wish you luck. We both know you will succeed, Cloudy said, hugging her. It was one of the biggest acts of affection Pinkie Pie had ever gotten from her distant mother. Her father merely stared, nodding. He was, as always, uninvolved. Limestone bit back tears and turned her emotions into anger. She gave a tough scowl as she ruffled her sister's mane and ruined that morning's brushing. We'll be just fine.
Will you visit us sometime?
Marble asked, not even trying to be tough. Her eyes were wet and she sniffled. Pinkie felt punched in the chest. She almost wanted to reconsider. Freed, Pinkie slung her pack and saddlebags over her back. She bounced, despite the weight of what she was taking with her, which was mostly recipe books and a few secret things.
I'll see if I can. No matter what, I'll try.
She waved, and then made a vow not to look back. Her pink body bounced away. Marble and Limestone stayed at the door as their parents immediately went inside, watching her fade into the horizon. When Pinkie Pie arrived in Ponyville, she had minor moments of confusion. The place was alive, filled with color and life in ways the old village could have never been. A pair of ponies with pastry cutie marks passed her one day while she sat on a bench, trying to plan how to begin everything from scratch. She had the idea that being a baking pony, she could appeal to them. They were practically birds of a feather in their hobbies, after all. She managed to win them over and get a job there. They even gave her the upstairs in return for a lower wage. She liked the area. It was much bigger than anything she'd ever had before. A new place meant brand new ponies to get to know, and friends to make. Already, Ponyville was much more friendly than her home. Her parties made the cakes get more and more attention. She raised their monthly income so hard that they had to expand their small shop. As it grew bigger, it gained a lot more ingredients, even exotic ones Pinkie couldn't wait to try out. Each week she'd do another party. She had a knack for remembering every birthday she was told, and birthdays went great with names. Thus, Pinkie's number system rose from the ashes in her new home. It expanded past the one she'd left in her sister's hooves. She was happy to share her cupcakes, and even better, all of the ponies of Ponyville actually liked to party and eat one too many cupcakes. She finally felt like she belonged, and Pinkie had a lot of laughter to share with them all.